Let me ask you this simple question. If you had to pick a word to best associate with the Disney parks, what would it be? Come on, go ahead, give it a whirl. No, not castles, although that is a good guess. The Osborne spectacle of dancing lights? That's really specific, and man, I really wish it was, but no, not for today. What? No, that's disgusting. Why would you even think that? You know what? No more guesses. I'm just going to tell you. If you thought nostalgia, or commonly referred to as nostalgia, you'd be correct. A simple definition of nostalgia is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. Although in recent years, I've noticed that myself and many others have begun to encounter this feeling for decades we've never experienced. The clip you're looking at right now is of a commercial that aired in the 1940s. Now, I always find myself intrigued by this decade for many reasons, but some of the basic ones are the fashion, the art style, or how they envision the future. What we refer to today as retrofuturism, and sorry Tomorrowland, but it's what you try and fail to accomplish. I challenge you, that's right, it's a challenge, to think of a decade. It doesn't have to be a decade, but maybe a lifestyle or experience you've never lived or partaken in, but have wistful affections for. And don't relate it to the Disney parks yet. That'll come later in the video. But if you remember a few key words from the definition, personal associations, you might be thinking, how am I feeling nostalgia for something that's never happened to me? It's probably because the definition itself is changing, but let's look deeper than that. Let's look at why we as a society are beginning to have these feelings. Professor Felipe de Brigard at Duke University believes that nostalgia has become broader than just your personal memories, but can include one's yearnings as well. I have a lot of theories as to why our minds are beginning to yearn for past decades, specific lifestyles, or experiences, the main reason being social media. Social media is a place where one can post a romanticized lifestyle that centers around travel, rural or city living, and maybe even a specific type of job. It's all right there at your fingertips to consume and makes you think, well, that looks pretty fun. Why don't I give it a try? But you probably won't end up doing it because if you're anything like me, it's really hard to get the missus to want to move to Wyoming and get a horse barn and become a cowboy. Or if you do give it a try, you might not experience the feeling you thought you would, and your yearning grows. That example really prioritizes Instagram, but another platform called Pinterest is also a culprit. Now I'll tell you a secret, folks. Pinterest isn't only for recipes, but for aesthetics that can easily be connected to past decades or lifestyles. I constantly find myself looking up 1940s men's fashion for outfit ideas, but in my head, all I'm thinking is, why don't they make pants that go up to your damn belly button anymore? Just pants. Just pants. Just pants. There are way more triggers out there, but the point is they're only a tap away in why this feeling is increasing amongst the youth in today's society. Even though this new form of nostalgia is prominent today and way less cool than what I'm about to talk about, the original definition that relates to one's personal history was utilized by Walt Disney himself. You know that guy who's responsible for all the parks, movies, and merchandise? Yeah, him. He did this many years ago. Main Street USA is an idolized version of Walt Disney's hometown, Marceline, Missouri, and was meant to evoke small-town America. Walt was playing with nostalgia so that once a guest walks into Disneyland, they think of their hometown and warm memories of childhood, setting the tone for parkgoers, and today it still works, but more closely relates to our new definition for nostalgia, as people from the turn of the century 1900s America don't really exist anymore. Unless you do, and if so, I applaud you for being 125 years old. For me personally, when I walk into Disneyland, I do have that yearning to experience 1900s America, because elements of that time period, as well as the visual aesthetic of Main Street itself, are appealing to me. But similar to depictions on Instagram or Pinterest, Main Street USA is a romanticized version of small-town America. Main Street USA is the perfect example to start with because you can see how its nostalgic feeling had been crafted for a specific purpose, but even with the passage of time and an alternative definition of the term, it still applies. Now that I have that out of the way, you can go ahead and start formulating in your mind what part creates the most nostalgia for you. The reason doesn't have to be because you want to live there, although I'd love to live in the tiki room. No? No? That's just me on that boat? Okay, fine, whatever. I make good choices, you don't. The reason can be anything, and I say this because the park I love the most gets a lot of hate in its modern form, and well, yes, it kind of deserves it, but we're not here to critique today. We're here to go on a journey down memory lane, to go to a park that always was, and never will be, kind of like those main streets all across America. Did that make sense? I think that made sense. That made sense, right? Yeah, I think that made sense.
First came the Magic Kingdom. Then the incredible Epcot Center. Now comes the new Disney MGM Studios theme park.
Disney's MGM Studios, now known as Disney's Hollywood Studios, opened on May 1st, 1989, and was created to immerse park guests into the golden age of Tinseltown, as well as provide background on how the movie-making process worked. The park was originally intended for a new pavilion at Epcot, titled Great Moments at the Movies, between the Land and the Imagination pavilions, but was expanded upon by Disney's CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, into its own theme park. In addition to taking guests behind the movie-making process, it acted as a working studio, a Hollywood of the East, if you will. And no, I'm not talking about you, Universal. This is a 100% original idea from Michael Eisner. It's totally because he didn't work at Paramount and knew your plans and knew you were making a park and even made the exact same tram tour. It was not any of that. It was his 100% original idea. Now that we got that straight, MGM Studios created live action and animated media for television and the big screen. A few projects to note that were worked on at the park were Mulan, Lilo and Stitch, and Brother Bear. Although for obvious reasons, like thousands of guests being at the park every day making a lot of noise, this idea didn't really pan out. Guests could get a glimpse of this process on the Backlot Tram Tour, which would take people through some of these live-action set pieces, such as residential streets, which were used in TV shows like The Golden Girls, or a recreation of New York City, which would later become known as the Streets of America. The tram tour during the park's inaugural years was roughly a 2-hour-long journey that included the tram portion, as well as a walking section, not only taking you through sets, but working costume, prop, and scenic departments, as well as a VFX show called Catastrophe Canyon. Although as the years progressed, the tram tour length began to shrink until it closed in 2014. During the early 1990s, the park heavily relied on shows because there are only 2 opening day attractions, the Backlot Tram Tour and the Great Movie Ride. Through the following years, the park would add Star Tours in December of 1989, a mild transition from the park's behind the movie theme, but its queue was created to look like a set rather than immersive land. Like, what's that place called? I think it's in the same park actually. It's Star something. Star something. What is it? Oh, that's right. Galaxy's Edge. 2 years after Star Tours, Muppet Vision 3D was the start of what would have become a larger expansion of a Muppet-themed land, one that I really would have wanted to have seen, because, as you can see, I kind of look like those guys. And maybe I could have made some friends. But due to the unfortunate passing of Jim Henson, that never happened. Again, Muppet Vision 3D was a mild transition from the park's theme, but in the grand scheme of things, it took you behind the scenes of a Muppet performance. Throughout the 1990s, the park so heavily relied on its theme about the golden age of Hollywood and would continue to do so through the early 2000s, but the core of how would change in the mid to late 90s. These additions became the park that I knew growing up and how MGM Studios became my favorite park, although I only remember a very brief window of it holding that name.
Picture, if you will, an abandoned hotel. Inside, you embark on a journey that defies the very laws of nature, dropping you faster than the force of gravity.
On July 22nd, 1994, the first major expansion to MGM Studios that included my favorite park weenie and themed area was created, Sunset Boulevard. Ah, breathe it in, the smell of sweaty park guests on a hot Florida summer day. The faint sounds of Bing Crosby or the Andrews sisters singing to you from the hidden speakers, the street signs, the palm trees, the billboards, the beautiful Art Deco architecture. Can you tell that I really love this area? All leading you to the best park weenie ever created, the Tower of Terror. Now, before I go any further, a park weenie was a term coined by Walt himself to describe an aspect of the park that a guest saw in order to draw them to that direction. Think the castles, the Matterhorn, the Tree of Life, the big golf ball, and Pixar Pal Around, I guess. I mean, it's kind of just a Ferris wheel, but most importantly, the Tower of Terror. The second attraction in this land, Rock and Roller Coaster, which is quite the odd thematic detachment from the land in general to pop an Aerosmith-themed ride to contrast the 1930s and 40s Hollywood. No wonder they tucked it back in that corner. These two expansions are what began to change as I see it, from taking you behind the movies to into the movies, but maintaining that old Hollywood feel, or at least the same showbiz glitz and glamour I believe Rock and Roller Coaster had. Into the movies is the theme being promoted today, which if you ask me, is a really weird way to say intellectual property park. The Tower of Terror very much tried to immerse you into a 1930s Hollywood episode of The Twilight Zone. The story revolved around park guests booking a night in the hotel, learning about the history and tragic past as we await our rooms, and then being led to said rooms through the service elevator, which is unfortunately the last working elevator in the hotel. I am skipping a whole lot there, but that is the general gist. While Rock and Roller Coaster had nothing to do with movies at all, rather the guest accompanying Aerosmith to one of their concerts. However, the land still fit the theme aesthetically, and Rock and Roller Coaster, while not movie related, took you into the recording studio with Aerosmith. These two attractions preluded the opening of Fantasmic in 1996, a nighttime show that originated at Disneyland on the rivers of America. A 10,000-seat amphitheater was created in order to house the show, and is probably my favorite nighttime show at any Disney park. With the addition of Fantasmic, it is again a transition from old Hollywood, or behind the magic of movie making, but like Rock and Roller Coaster, fits that showbiz feel in some regards. In the late 90s through the mid-2000s, the park didn't endure massive change. The mid-2000s was when a young version of myself began remembering my Disney World trips and fell in love with the park. I was lucky enough to grow up in a family held by two theme park fanatics. On the last day of our trip, my family split into two. Myself with my dad and my mom with my sister. On this last day, my sister and I were given a choice on which park we liked to visit again. She always chose Epcot, while I always chose Hollywood Studios. I have this distinct memory of sitting on the wall of a plant bed with my Mickey ice cream sandwich in hand, staring down that beautiful Sunset Boulevard. My ice cream was dripping down my hand, but I didn't care. All I heard were the faint sounds of screams of riders on the Tower of Terror, music I'd never heard but enticed me, buildings I didn't appreciate the detail of, but I knew that I loved. At that moment, I felt nostalgia when I didn't know what it felt like, or more importantly meant. But I did say, this place is pretty cool. And if that little moment isn't a representation of the Disney magic, then I don't know what is. A child discovering an interest in old Hollywood that he doesn't understand yet, but will learn to love. A place where he can always return to feel moved or inspired from old experiences and present ones. In the end, there really is no Disney without nostalgia. In the late 2000s, the park began to lose its overall theme even further. Pixar Studios opened in 2008 with Toy Story Mania, replacing former sound stages, a very fun attraction, but returned to the cheaper studio look opposed to Sunset Boulevard, and had nothing to do with the park's theme. In 2015, more expansion was announced, which would demolish the unused sound stages and backlot portions of the park, as well as the streets of America, causing the Osborne family spectacle of dancing lights to be no more, one of my favorite elements of the park around Christmas time. In 2018, Toy Story Land opened, shrinking you down to the size of a toy in Andy's backyard. The following year, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge opened, pushing Disney into a whole new realm of themed lands due to the success of Harry Potter at Universal. The following year, Mickey's Runaway Railway replaced the Great Movie Ride. Now if you skip a few years, that brings you to today, because that's how time works. Muppet Land is on its last leg, waiting to be replaced by Monsters Inc., and Rock and Roller Coaster is getting rethemed to the Muppets of all things. Change is happening, and guess what? That's okay. The last two times I went to Disney World were in 2016 and 2024, which if you can do math is 8 years between visits. So when I went back to Hollywood Studios, it felt unrecognizable outside of Echo Lake and Sunset Boulevard. While it makes me sad, the park I fell in love with is fading. I still love Hollywood Studios. Toy Story Land and Galaxy's Edge are really fun, even if you don't have a strong attachment to the IP, and the theme for the park itself is in shambles. I was blown away from Rise of Resistance, and Slinky Dog Dash is a fun family roller coaster. In the end, change is okay, even if you don't like it, because that's human. The place you grew up is going to change, your friends and family are going to change, you are going to change, and Disney is going to change as well. You may like it, or you may not. It may be objectively bad, or it may not. Humans make mistakes, and that's okay. We can criticize it all we want and advocate for better parks, but we must not forget why we go to Disney in the first place. It's not to be sad our favorite attractions left us, but to reminisce on the memories that were and the memories being made presently. Because what Sunset Boulevard meant to me could be what Galaxy's Edge means to thousands of kids. When I went to Hollywood Studios in 2024, I got in early due to extra magic hours. I strolled down the boulevard with only a handful of others. The music I now recognize and the buildings I now understood why I loved them. Tower of Terror stood looming ahead of me. I took pictures, I read billboards, I smiled, and I felt moved. And I said to myself, this is pretty cool.
So sit back and enjoy this sneak preview of the Hollywood we created in Florida. It's not so much a theme park as a state of mind. A Hollywood that never was and will always be.
Thank you all for watching and making it to the end of the video. I hope all the themes I was trying to evoke came across well, and I got you reminiscing on fun memories. I didn't really have a goal with this one. I just kind of want to talk about nostalgia, which I find fascinating, and how it lends to Disney and why we all love it. Please leave your memories down below if you like, because I'd love to read them. What else do people do in these outros? Oh, if you want to follow me on socials, you can't, because I don't have any. Well, I guess I have Pinterest, but I don't even know if you can follow people in there. Do people do that? Maybe people do that. Well, this is getting kind of long. Well, I think that's about it. Goodbye.